Welcome back to Mr. DuPage's classroom. This lesson is for my Algebra 1 class. It is 10.5 Day 2 notes. We're going to talk about completing the square again and how we can use that to graph. So to complete the square, I need to create a blank. Then I will take the b value divide by 2 and square it. Okay. What I would like you to do now is to go ahead and try examples 1 and 2 on your own. These should be review. Actually, before I have you do that, let's talk about 2 real quick. The first thing I need to do on 2 is I want to divide everything by 5. I'm basically taking out the greatest common factor. When I do that, I end up with k squared minus 4k equals 5. At that point, you guys should be able to, based on what we did yesterday, figure out how to solve that. So I want you to go ahead and try examples 1 and 2 on your own. Pause the video. When you get done, come on back and check your work against mine. Alright, there is my work. Go ahead and check that against yours. See how you did. If you have any questions over how to complete the square, please make sure you ask. You should have a pretty good idea of how to do it at this point. Let's go ahead and move on then. These solutions are related to the graphs of each quadratic. The solutions you found in problems 1 through 4 are, well, really 1 and 2. That's not really 1 through 4. They're really the x-intercepts of the graphs of the quadratic equations. So the parabolas, the U-shaped graph, it's where our U-shaped graph crosses the x-axis. Completing the square can lead us to some very important information about the graph of a quadratic equation. Specifically, it can lead us to vertex form, where h and k is the vertex of the parabola, and for simplicity we'll be dealing with equations that have an a value of 1. Now what you need to recognize is that this h inside of the parenthesis is going to be opposite. So I do not trust anything that is inside of the parenthesis. I want to go opposite of what's inside the parenthesis, okay? Let's go ahead and just get right into this. I will show you where the vertex form comes from when we get there, okay? Using completing the square to write the following quadratic function in vertex form and sketch the graph. So what we want to do first is just solve it. We're going to do exactly the same thing we've been doing. So we're going to go ahead and take x squared plus 6x plus blank equals. I'm going to have subtracted this 4 over, so it'll be negative 4 plus blank. Now I can take the 6 and divide by 2. So I'm going to take 6 divided by 2 and square it, which is 3 squared, which is 9. Okay? So I have x plus 3 squared equals 5. You should know how to get to that point. This is where I want you to see this is extremely similar to our vertex form. If you look at our vertex form, there's a number out front, which I could always put a 1 down. There's a number out front. I have an x plus or minus an h squared, and then I have a plus k. Well, I'll show you how we can fix that later to where we bring the 5 over and we'll have vertex form. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and finish solving this problem. So it'll be x plus 3 equals plus or minus 2.24 is the square root of 5. So then I have x plus 3 equals 2.24, and x plus 3 equals negative 2.24. Subtract the 3, x equals negative 0.76. Subtract the 3 from both sides, x equals negative 5.24. That's where my zeros are going to be, my x-intercepts. That's where my x-intercepts are going to be. So on the graph, it's going to be just in between 1 and 0, and then the negative 5.24 is going to be just short, or in between the 5 and the 6. So those are my 2 zeros. Now, what I want to do is I want to write this in vertex form. Well, vertex form is a times x minus h squared plus k. Where that comes from is right here. I'm going to take that piece and bring it down without the square roots. So what I end up using is x plus 3 squared equals 5. Now notice this equals y. Okay. Now notice I need to bring that 5 over so that it becomes my k. So I'll end up with x plus 3 squared minus 5 equals y. This will allow me then to figure out what my vertex is. My vertex comes from this number and this number. The first number that's in with the x becomes my x. So my vertex is, the x value of my vertex comes from inside the parentheses. And since I don't trust anything that's inside the parentheses, I'm going to make that a -3. I don't believe it. I'm going to go opposite of what it tells me. Okay. My y value comes from the outside of my parentheses, so the -5. I do trust things that are outside the parenthesis, so I have -3, -5. If I go ahead and plot that, it should be right in the center of my other 2 points. Now I can connect them with a U, and I'm good to go. Okay? That is how you use vertex form from completing the square to find your vertex after you have found your x-intercepts. Let's go ahead and move on. Try another and then sketch the graph of the quadratic function using vertex form. So the first thing we want to do is find our zeros. Here's our original equation. Obviously we want to add the 22. So instead of y, I'm going to put 0 in for y. X squared minus 8x minus 22. I'm going to add the 22 over. Now I want to rearrange this just because it helps me visually. So I'm going to add my blank. I have my 22 plus blank. Go ahead and solve. So it would be -8 over 2 squared equals -4 squared, which is 16. Okay. At this point, I can have x minus 4 squared equals 22 plus 16 is going to be 38. All right. Right now, I can stop for a second because what I want to do is I want to take that whole section and I want to use it for my vertex. So I'm going to rewrite it down here. X minus 4 squared equals 38. We'll get back to that in a minute. I just want to make sure that you guys realize that is the point that you're finding your vertex from. Okay. Now I can come back up here, divide, take the square root. I end up with x minus 4 equals plus or minus 6.16. Okay. Now I can take and split up my two equations. X minus 4 equals 6.16. And we'll go ahead and add 4 there. X equals 10.16. And then x minus 4 equals -6.16. If I add 4 to that, I end up with x equals -2.16. Now, when it says sketch, it doesn't have to be perfect. So we're just going to make ourselves a little coordinate plane. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to call this -2.160. I'm going to make a point over here. I'm going to call it 10.160. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just needs to be there. Okay. So I have my two x-intercepts. What I have left to do is to find my vertex. So I want to go ahead and find my vertex from here. How do I do that? Well, I need to subtract that 38. End up with x minus 4 squared minus 38 equals y. So my vertex again comes from here and here. Do not believe anything that's inside of the parentheses, so it'll end up being +4. I do believe what's outside, -38. So +4 will be somewhere to the right of the y-axis, and -38 will be somewhere way low. So let's call it somewhere in here. Just label it, and we can call it good. There's our graph. All right. What I would like you to do now is to go ahead and try number 3 on your own. Hopefully you have a pretty good understanding of how to do this at this point. Give it a shot. Go ahead and pause the video. Let's see what you can do. All right, that is the sketch of example number 3. What I did is I brought this x minus 2.5 here. I brought this up here so I could have a space to work with my vertex. So don't get confused by that, please. I finished all the rest of my work for solving the x-intercepts on the left. I did all my vertex work on the right, and we are done there. So check your work against mine. Notice I have my labels. They just kind of got tight over there, so I had to draw some arrows to where the points were. Okay. Check your work against mine. If you have any issues, please make sure you ask. What I'm going to do from here is we will talk about the last two graphs when we are in class. So that is the end of our video. Make sure that if you have any questions on how to complete the square and use that to create your vertex form to then graph, you come in and see me. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching the video and have a great day.